You're listening to episode 54 of A Whole New You podcast. On today's show, Lori interviews Jeff Chilton about medicinal mushrooms. He highlights the many benefits of mushrooms and uncovers what makes a quality mushroom supplement. You may just be surprised what is included in many out there on the market. Welcome to A Whole New You podcast. I'm your co-host, Kim Maravich. I'm a registered nurse and author of the book 360 Health. I'm joined by my dear friend, Lori Biddle, a health and wellness coach certified through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Our show exists to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health with weekly tips and conversation about self-care, mindset, nutrition, fitness, and clean living. Please keep in mind that the material provided in this podcast is intended as general information only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the show. Before we get to the show, I would like to read a 5-star review that we received through iTunes. This is from BMS NYC. It's titled, "This is a Must Download." Kim and Lori keep it light, interesting, and informative. I feel like they read my mind because I'll think something like, I should really try bar again, and they'll do an entire episode about the benefits of bar exercise. I love how knowledgeable and approachable they both are. I learn something new from every episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave this awesome review. Reviews help boost our rankings in iTunes, and they help people find our show who might not know about it already. So if you're listening out there right now, why don't you pause the show and head over to iTunes? You can subscribe there and also leave us a rating and review. If you do, we'll be sure to read your review on a future episode. Now let's get to the show.
Welcome to another episode of A Whole New You podcast. Today I'm here with Jeff Chilton, who studied ethnomycology at the University of Washington in the late 60s, and in 1973 began a 10-year career as a large-scale commercial mushroom grower. A founder of Micromedia, which sponsored 4 mushroom conferences from 1979 through 1985, Jeff is the co-author of The Mushroom Cultivator, which was published in 1983. In 1989, Jeff established Namex, the first company to supply medicinal mushroom extracts to the nutritional supplement industry. In 1997, he organized the first organic certification workshop for mushroom production in China. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Jeff. This medicinal mushroom thing is really growing in popularity, and people are starting to have more of an understanding about it. But, there's still just, it's an unknown to many people. They don't know the benefits, and we're so lucky to have you here with us today to give us some background and tell us how powerful they are.
Well, hi, Lori. Thank you so much for having me. And, mushrooms are something that most people don't know a lot about. And so it's great when I can get out and help to educate people. I really love to do that. And, what's interesting is that, in a sense, I consider mushrooms to be the missing link, kind of a forgotten food. They're not a plant. They're not an animal. They have their own kingdom. So they sit right in the middle there. So it's something, again, that most people don't know a lot about them. But right now, the whole mushroom world is just expanding so rapidly, and they're finally catching up here in North America to what people all over the world have known for a long time.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting stuff. I'm so excited to hear, more about it. But before we get into all the many benefits of mushrooms, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your background and what got you into the mushroom business in the first place.
Well, I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest out in the Seattle area. And, it's called the Evergreen State in Washington, and for a good reason, because it rains all the time. So, and because of that rain, we have beautiful evergreen forests, and we have lakes and rivers, and we also have a perfect climate for mushrooms to grow, and one of the best in the world, actually. So they were around me as I was growing up, and then when I went to university, I decided to study mushrooms, and also my major was anthropology. So I put the two together, and that's where ethnomycology comes in, because what my study was all about was the use of mushrooms by people worldwide for food, for medicine, and for shamanistic purposes, for healing purposes. So that was sort of my focus during university. And then when I left university in 1971, I was like, well, what am I going to do with a degree in anthropology, for goodness sakes? So my mycology professor actually said, hey, well, there's a mushroom farm 60 miles down the road. Why don't you go down there and see if you can get a job? And I thought, wow, now that's really interesting, growing mushrooms. And so I went down. I got a job on this very, very large mushroom farm. I mean, a farm that was growing 2 million pounds of agaricus mushrooms every year. And I ended up at the farm for the next 10 years.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Really interesting stuff. Yeah. So during that time, I'm sure you were personally experiencing, the benefits of mushrooms. But for our audience, and those who are not familiar, again, it's kind of a growing trend right now in the holistic health industry. But let's dive into the nutritional benefits of mushrooms.
Oh, yeah. That's such an interesting subject, because while I was there, one of the things that was going on in the mushroom industry was to basically convince people to eat mushrooms. Of course, as any industry that's growing food, and because mushrooms at that time were considered to be kind of a garnish, or something that added flavor to a meal. But classical nutritionists actually looked at mushrooms and said, oh, these have no food value. And the
Mm,
reason they said this was because mushrooms are low in calories. I mean, can you
mm,
imagine? Oh, your food has no calories. Today we prize low caloric foods in many ways, but back then it was like no calories. This is of no value. But the fact of the matter is that mushrooms have a good amount of protein for a vegetable, anywhere from 20 to 40%. They're mostly carbohydrates, but good carbohydrates. Something to remember about mushrooms is mushrooms do not have starch. Plants have starch. Mushrooms have a small amount, as their storage carbohydrate, a small amount of glycogen. And the interesting thing about that, and some people will talk about this, is the fact that we share some traits in common with mushrooms. And one of those traits is humans. Animals have glycogen. Mushrooms have glycogen, but the carbohydrates in mushrooms are high quality carbohydrates. One of them is carb called mannitol, and mannitol is a sugar that's a very slow digesting sugar. So that's one of the carbs that, in a sense, is a good carb. The other thing about mushroom carbohydrates is they have compounds called beta glucans, and beta glucans make up the cell wall of a mushroom, and the beta glucan is the compound in mushrooms that makes them medicinal.
mm.
The other part of mushrooms is they're very high in fiber, so they're going to feed your microbiome, low in fats, and they're also high in B vitamins. So most mushrooms will have a good amount of B1, which is thiamine, riboflavin, B2, and B3 niacin. In fact, with riboflavin and niacin, they will provide you with like 100 grams of fresh mushrooms will give you 25% of your daily allowance for those three B vitamins. So mushrooms are a really good food, and you know what? I recommend eating mushrooms to just about everybody that I talk to, because again, they are just such a high quality food, and yet a lot of people are not really familiar with them. So I tell them, look, if you're going to the supermarket and check out the mushroom area. And today, which is really great, is today, rather than just one mushroom there, you can get 3 or 4, or if you're in the right city or area, you can get up to 6 different mushrooms. And the one I recommend for people to try is the shiitake mushroom. Shiitake mushrooms are delicious. In fact, the name of the shiitake mushroom in Chinese is shangu, which means fragrant mushroom. So again, what I recommend to people is put mushrooms into your diet. It's an excellent, excellent food.
Yeah, no kidding. That is, a lot of nutrients in one food. And I wasn't aware of the protein. That's interesting. I had no idea.
Well, yeah, and it is interesting. And one of the things to remember too, and this is that when we're talking about mushrooms, it's kind of like mushrooms are a really broad category, sort of like talking about vegetables.
Yeah, right.
So every different mushroom species will have a different nutritional profile. So one mushroom might have 20% protein, the other one would have 40% protein. And this is a fairly high quality protein too, because it's got a very good profile of amino acids. There's only, I think, one of the essential amino acids that's actually low. So some scientists out there have talked about, especially in the third world, where you can use mushrooms to actually decompose agricultural wastes, and to have mushroom growers in those countries producing a product that ultimately will provide protein to a lot of areas where they don't have a lot of protein.
Wow. Wow. So having like a portobello burger, really, you are getting some protein from that.
That's
That's great.
absolutely right. Isn't that funny? They actually have a mushroom burger where you got a big portobello on it. And it's today's food market out there too, and especially when we're talking about meat. There's a lot of new types of non-meat meat out there. And I was actually talking to somebody recently who has got a mushroom burger that will be on the market soon. And this mushroom burger actually uses shiitake, a part of the shiitake mushroom, as the basis. And this part that they use is very fibrous. And he says it tastes so meaty because it's got the texture of meat. And of course, that's really the thing that they look for, as much as taste, is does it have that texture of
Mhm.
meat. So it was really sort of interesting to me. And again, considering all the burgers out there that are made from soy and things, I just always thought, well, this is a great way to bring mushroom and the mushroom protein into the market.
It sure is. So if you're in a grocery store that only has like the white cap mushrooms, are they pretty good too, or are you better off making the trip to a health food store that's going to have a much greater variety?
Well, you know what? This is interesting because the button mushroom, and remember, that was the mushroom that I grew for 10 years at this farm. And again, it was a very, very big farm, and we had like tons and tons and tons of mushrooms that we were growing there. And I ate lots of them, and I still do. I consider that still to be an excellent edible mushroom. And so I encourage people, if that's the only one there, go ahead and eat that. It's got a very good flavor. The texture is good. One of the things that I want everybody to know about mushrooms, though, is the way you cook them. When you cook mushrooms, you should put them in a hot pan with your whatever oil that you may use, but a hot pan. And this is really important because what happens is that when you cook mushrooms at a low heat, all of the water will come out of them. And the next thing you know, you're looking into your fry pan and it's like a puddle with these mushrooms in there. And then you wonder why people will say, oh, yeah, mushrooms, they're slimy. It's like, no, no, no. You have to cook them properly. When I put them in hot pan, and I like to brown them on both sides. I like to slice them about, and again, this is could be any mushroom. I slice them about maybe a quarter inch thick. Don't slice them too thin. I throw them into the pan. I make sure that each side gets browned up. And the other thing that's really interesting that you'll find is maybe you'll chop up a couple mushrooms, you throw them in, you fry them up, and you go, where'd they go? They will shrink. But the key
Hmm.
thing is when you cook them, that moisture stays inside, does not come out and form a puddle that they're cooking in. Now that's fine if you want to do a gravy or something like that, but not if you want to take mushrooms. And let's say, for example, you're frying them up and you want to put them on a steak, or you could fry them up in a stir fry or something like that. Be sure that you fry them at a high heat, or else you'll be sorry, and your children will say, "What are these slimy things?"
Yeah, I've definitely added them into our day to day. And my kids even like them now too. But we started just kind of throwing them in a stir fry, throwing them on top of like our little homemade pizza night, that kind of stuff, putting them on meat. And now they really have a whole new appreciation for them too. Because when I studied at IIN, there were many parts of the curriculum that talked about the benefits of mushroom and really how they're like cancer fighters, and just put them in your diet every day. Because that little, very tasty thing, has such powerful health benefits.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember too is that mushrooms, that fiber in the mushrooms, they are a prebiotic, so they will go down and feed your microbiome. So that's the other side of it that we don't talk about a whole lot. But now that we're hearing more about the microbiome and the importance of fiber, because we all know the importance of fiber in our diet, but mushrooms have a lot of fiber.
And prebiotic. That's a really big deal this time of year too, as we're heading into cold and flu season. Like the gut is like our second brain, and it really helps, us have a strong immune system, which is what we need as we head into cold and flu. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And speaking about that, the mushroom, they are what, especially the medicinal mushrooms, what they're considered to be what's called an adaptogen. And
Mhm.
it's that's kind of a really interesting word, because what it is, it's a food or an herb that supports homeostasis. It's something that promotes harmony and balance. And that's so interesting, because what we're all looking for to maintain our health is actually a balance. You hear people talk about a balanced diet and things like that, but balance is so important. And my sort of disease model or metaphor is harmony. And when you go out of balance, that's when disease comes in, and all of a sudden you become sick. So it's one of these things where it will help you maintain that balance. It'll do it in the background, but it'll be there working for you. And that's certainly a subject that we can get into a little deeper as we talk about medicinal mushrooms.
Oh, good. Yeah, I definitely want to do that. But first, I want to kind of like backtrack a minute and just talk about like what is a mushroom? Like,
That's right. What is this thing? Well, here, let me explain it this way, because um, for one, so let's just start here. A mushroom does not have seeds. Okay, so if it doesn't have seeds, how do you plant this thing? How does it grow? Mushrooms have spores. So think of it like, okay, you start with a spore, and a spore is microscopic, and you can't see it, and the spore is out there, from the mature mushroom. It's out there. The spores are everywhere, and they're landing on the soils. They're landing on wood. And when those spores land in a environment that's beneficial to them and conducive to their growth, they will germinate. And when they germinate, they'll germinate into a very fine filament, almost like a hair. I mean, it's very, very fine filament. And when multiple spores germinate, these filaments will grow out, and they will fuse together, and they will form a network. And this network is called mycelium. And this mycelium, what it does is it is growing into, whether it's that wood or into the soil or some organic matter, and feeding on that. And again, mushrooms are nature's recyclers. they're out there. All of those leaves, the wood, the stuff from your garden at the end of the season, all of that organic matter is what mushrooms feed on, and ultimately they're breaking that down and turning it into humus that can be utilized by plants in the next generation. So here we've got this mycelium, and it is what we would call the body of this organism. So the mycelium, and normally we don't see it because it's under the ground or it's inside that piece of wood, so we don't normally see it. But when conditions are right, and that would be here in the Northwest, it would be the fall, the temperature drops, the rains come, and it gets very moist and wet, and everybody, all the plants are loving it because they're getting a lot more water now. So the humidity is very high, and the mushroom comes up. So this mycelium has gotten all of this energy over the summer as it's feeding on all this organic matter. Now it produces a mushroom. That mushroom will be there for maybe anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks as it comes up. As it matures, the cap on the mushroom will expand. Under the cap are gills. On those gills, that's where the spores are produced. The spores will be produced. They will drop down out of those gills. They'll float out into the air. And at that point, that life cycle is complete. So we've got spore, mycelium, and then the mushroom. So these are what we call plant parts. So, every plant will have different parts, and I'm talking sort of in a botanical sense, or in my industry of nutritional supplements, because a lot of those supplements will be maybe the root of some plant, maybe it'll be the leaves, maybe it'll be the fruit of that plant. But it's very important to know which plant part you are going to be consuming. And in this case, we're talking about mushrooms, which is the plant part of this organism that provides us with all those benefits.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I have to say, I don't know that our listeners realize that we don't see each other when we're recording these podcasts. And Jeff, as you're talking, I am just picturing you in the picture you sent me, which you all will be able to see on social media and whatnot. And it's just him surrounded by mushrooms. And as you're talking, it's all I can see in my head is just all these mushrooms surrounding you. And I love it. It's so great. Okay, so now we know about the plant parts and what a mushroom is. We've had some moist conditions and I see them popping up like in my front yard, but those aren't ones that we would want to pull out and eat, right? There's definitely ones that are edible and ones that are not, right?
Well, yes, absolutely right. And people should never ever harvest a wild mushroom if they have no idea what it is. They never harvest it and eat it. If you really are interested in wild mushrooms, the best thing you can do is, in most large metropolises, there will be mycological societies. So these are like mushroom clubs, and they love new people to come in, and these clubs go out in the mushroom season, and they'll go out and foray for mushrooms, and then they will bring them back in and identify them, and that's a great way to learn about the different wild mushrooms that are out there. And ultimately, let's just say you learn one mushroom or you learn two mushrooms, and then you can have some confidence about going out and picking mushrooms. But otherwise, never ever pick a mushroom and then take it back and slice it up and decide you're going to eat it. That's not a good strategy for living at all, because it's not just mushrooms that can be poisonous. There are poisonous plants out there too. And I remember growing up how my mother would tell me about, certain plants. Don't eat, this berry or that berry or something. It's like these are things that we have to learn about. So no, it's really important if you're going to or have an interest in wild mushrooms, to find somebody who knows about them, go out with them, enjoy. Mushroom hunting is just so much fun, Lori. You go out into the woods most often. You've got fresh air, a beautiful environment. If it sometimes it can be a very nice day. You're walking along. It's just wonderful to be out in nature, and then all of a sudden you find this mushroom, and it's like finding treasure. And when I grew up, and look, I grew up in the 50s, and I still remember all of those Walt Disney movies of Treasure Island and all the other tales. And so for me, it was a very romantic time. And so finding treasure was just something. And I look at it in that sense when I'm mushroom hunting. And so if I find something, that's wonderful. If I don't, I've had a really nice walk in the woods.
Now we'd like to take a minute to give a shout out to our show partners, Perfect Supplements and Amazon. Perfect Supplements is a family-owned and operated business that supports local farms. Their superfoods and supplements are non-GMO, third-party tested for purity, and contain no synthetic ingredients, colors, or flavors. They're also organic or wild harvested and fairly traded. Products range from collagen and bone broth powders to plant proteins, greens, desiccated liver, and adaptogenic herbs. Perfect also carries vitamins and supplements from other reputable sources, like Just Thrive, Dr. Mercola, Gaia Herbs, Green Pastures, Garden of Life, and Prescript Assist. To check out their wide array of products, go to perfectsupplements.com/Kim. If you use coupon code KIM10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. This is a great way to get superfood nutrition while helping to support our podcast. And just as a disclaimer, it's not the intention of our podcast to provide specific medical advice, but rather to provide you with information to better understand the role of dietary supplements in health. We urge you to consult with a qualified health provider to discuss both the advantages and risks of using dietary supplements. Our other show partner, Amazon, is the largest online warehouse and carries just about everything you need. If you shop on Amazon, which is likely, you can support our show at the same time at no additional cost to you. Simply use our affiliate link to enter the site, then browse and buy, just as you normally would. A Whole New You podcast will make a small commission from your purchase, which helps to support production costs for the show. You can find a clickable Amazon link in the show notes for this episode. You can also go to the products page of our website, awholenewyoupodcast.com, to find the link. If you love our show and appreciate the free information you get each week, please consider buying from Perfect or using our affiliate link when making purchases on Amazon. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, it sounds like a great experience. I'll have to look into, around my area who does that, because I think it would be a great thing to do and learn about. So is there a time of year that is, like we're heading into winter here, I imagine it's probably not the best time to go out looking for mushrooms. So what time of year? Probably spring when it's raining, I would imagine, is a good time.
Well, you know what? There's some mushrooms that grow in the spring. One of the more famous ones is called a morel.
Okay.
But most of the mushrooms, and the mushroom season is really in the fall. So
Oh, okay.
usually as temperatures start to decline and as the rains of fall move in, that's really the general mushroom season. So that's the time to think about it. And that's the time when all of a sudden you'll notice them coming up. And I think people, need to understand. It's like, okay, you think, oh, where did that come from? It just, popped up. Well, no, it didn't really pop up because that mycelium was under the ground feeding over the summertime. And once it had enough nutrients, up it came. And one of the interesting things about wild mushrooms is that they will come up in the same spot every year, as long as there's plenty of food there for them. And that's why mushroom hunters, when you ask, oh, where'd you find them? They say, well, I can't really tell you. That's my secret spot.
Right. Yeah. You found that treasure. You're not giving it up, right?
No, that's right. I'll share it with you, but no, I'm not going to take you there to see where it grew.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, definitely. All right. So let's dive in now to the medicinal mushrooms, the different ones that really kind of fall in the medicinal category and their primary uses?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, the most medicinal mushrooms, what they the main property is that they will potentiate the immune response, and they're called biological response modifiers. So what they do, and this is all because of these beta glucans that they have. So the beta glucans, as we either consume the mushroom or as we take the supplement, they actually will go down and they will hit receptor sites that we have down in our small intestine, and those receptor sites, they will then activate immune cells like T cells, macrophages, NK cells. So and this basically what it's going to do is it's going to enhance our resistance against infections from various types of bacteria, viruses, other fungi, but essentially they are there. They're working in the background. If you need that type of boost, or let's say that type of potentiation, that strengthening, they are there. They are strengthening your immune system, and in that sense, what I the sort of like overarching theme for me is that these are um, foods and supplements that function as preventive medicines.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this sort of gets back to the concept I was talking about earlier of the adaptogen, because basically, when we're in a state which we could call homeostasis, that really does relate to our ability to maintain a balance and a harmony. And again, that's really, when you're well, you don't think about your health, so to speak. You're well, you feel good, you're doing things, and it's not until you're sick that you go, oh my god, I feel this way or that way. Instead, when you're well, you just feel good. You're just cruising along through life and everything is fine. So mushrooms will function as preventive medicines, but they're also certain mushrooms that have other activities, and those activities are really interesting. For example, there's a mushroom out there called lion's mane, and I don't know if you've heard of lion's mane, but it's
I have not.
really, really. You say?
I have not actually,
You
no, but I can
okay?
kind of picture it. Okay, go on.
Well, it's a really interesting mushroom because it sort of grows as a roundish, and it's white, and it has these long, sort of almost like long spines in a way, but so it looks almost like the mane of a lion. That's why they call it lion's mane. But what's interesting is lion's mane has compounds in it that will activate something we have called nerve growth factor, and nerve growth factor maintains the neurons. So stimulating this nerve growth factor actually will help. They have found through scientific research will actually help to maintain your memory. They've been using it in some cases. They found some positive effects for dementia. And it's really interesting because they've got clinical trials out there that they've done in Japan that actually, and they'll do it with older people that are starting to have memory issues, and they'll give them a battery of tests, and they've got a control group, and they'll give the one group, let's just say 3 dried grams of lion's mane. That's about an ounce of fresh mushrooms, and give them a test, and then after 30 days they'll test both groups, and the group that's had the lion's mane will do much better on the tests. And then after another 30 days, when they've all stopped, or the one group has stopped taking it, they drop back down to the baseline. It's really interesting. So
Wow.
that's one of the interesting new mushrooms out there is called lion's mane. Another mushroom that's pretty interesting is called cordyceps, and cordyceps is really interesting because it's used to be wildcrafted up in Tibet, and it's a small little fungus that grows off of a caterpillar. So they call it caterpillar fungus. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what is that? Well, they would harvest these. In season in Tibet, and it's actually, believe it or not, it's the most expensive herb in the world. It costs $20,000 a kilogram, which
Wow.
makes it pretty difficult to want to consume it. And many people over here would go, caterpillar, no, thank you. Well, and I understand and I agree, but we can cultivate that now. So we cultivate the cordyceps without the caterpillar, so nobody's having to go beyond their vegetarian, predilection. But so the cordyceps is used for what's called neurasthenia, people that have been kind of sick and they're just pulling out, they're starting to get well, but they just can't seem to get over the hump. They'll use it for neurasthenia. It's also used for fatigue. People feel energyless, so it's also something that's used for fatigue, and because of that, a lot of athletes are starting to try cordyceps now and see if it helps their performance in some way. And interestingly enough, the way they figure that out, believe it or not, is that they will take mice, and they'll take a mice and they'll put it in a swimming pool, and they'll let it swim, and it swims, and they time it. And as soon as it's like, I can't swim any longer, they'll pull it out, and then they'll check the time, and then they'll feed other mice this particular mushroom powder for a week or so, and then they'll put it in there to swim, and it swims around, and then they check its time. And in these swimming tests, they've shown that the mouse that's actually been consuming this mushroom can swim for a lot longer. And so these are one of the ways that they test for fatigue when scientists are doing their tests. It's kind of, no animals were hurt, but it's a kind of interesting how they devise these tests. And you think, oh well, that's kind of interesting. And but at any rate, so that's cordyceps, and the other mushroom, I don't know if you've heard of, is called reishi.
Mm-hmm.
Reishi is a mushroom actually that you can't eat because it is very woody. But all of these mushrooms have been used in, and why we know about them is because they've been used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years, and they've got an herbal medicine uh, body of evidence for thousands of years. And then what we do, of course, is we go out and we look at the scientific literature and says, okay, is there any scientific testing that's been done that tell us that yes, indeed, these are active. And once we've validated and verified that, we go, okay, we've got the ancient use, so and then we've got the scientific evidence, and that's where we put the two together. But reishi is something, again, you can't eat it, but you brew it up into a tea. And reishi mushroom is called the mushroom of immortality, if you can imagine. And the reason they say that is that essentially it's got compounds. It's got these beta glucans. It's got other compounds called triterpenoids, and those put together will make it what they consider a longevity herb. And so this longevity herb is something that you would take as you're getting older and just consume it through the rest of your life. And essentially, it is considered to be something that will make you live longer. And so, and you know what, I think in general, and let's face it, our diet is so important. It is the foundation to our health. So if you're eating a good diet, and if you have certain foods in there that have certain beneficial properties, it's almost like saying food as medicine. Isn't that really what we're after, Lori?
Absolutely. Food is medicine, and mushrooms are medicine. And I love that you talk about, these different forms of, different ways to consume our mushrooms. It's not always cooking them up in a pan and eating them. We've got the tea, and you also mentioned a powder. I know that's what they were giving the mice, but it's, as far as supplements and a mushroom supplement, are those typically powder form? And let's get into kind of like quality of mushroom supplements and what that supplement looks like. I imagine that's what a lot of the athletes are using, that you spoke to for endurance.
Oh yeah, and this is very important. I mean, my goodness, I mean, we've all walked into a health food store and we've walked through the supplement area, and it is just overwhelming. My God, it doesn't matter what type of supplement, there must be 10 or 20 different brands. And where it's like, which one should I take? Which one is going to be a good one? And let me tell you, uh, there are such variations in quality, and it is
Mhm.
especially true about the whole mushroom category. And I'm going to give your listeners a bit of a clue here about mushroom supplements because what's happened is that mushrooms are expensive to produce. Did you listen? You know that mushrooms are still picked by hand. They're
Yeah.
still harvested by hand. So all of those millions and millions of mushrooms out there that are going to market, somebody has actually picked that. It's just amazing to think of in today's world that they're picked by hand, but they are. And so growing mushrooms is expensive. And just as an example, if I actually go to the market with my pound of mushrooms, and maybe I get $5 for that pound of mushrooms. Well, mushrooms are fresh; they're 90% water. Supplements are a dry powder. When I take the water out of that mushroom, now instead of $5, I have to get $50 for that pound of mushrooms. The economics are very difficult. So in North America, what happens is a lot of companies now will actually produce the mycelium in a laboratory on sterilized grains, and at the end of the process, when that mycelium has covered those grains, which is about 30 days, they will take them out of the bag they're growing in. They will slice them, dry them, grind them to a powder, grain and all. And the point is that they don't produce a mushroom. Instead, they produce the mycelium stage, but they do it on grain and don't separate the grain out at the end of the process. So, what happens is those products end up being mostly grain starch. Now, nothing wrong with grains, in my opinion, in terms of, some people don't eat grains, which is fine. I still love my bread. but,
Mhm.
but the thing is that these products are being sold as mushroom,
Very
and
misleading.
they're not mushrooms. So you go in and look, 70% of the mushroom supplements that you will find in a store are these products that are made on grain. And so you're not actually getting a mushroom, even though you look at the label and you see a picture of a mushroom. It says reishi mushroom, shiitake mushroom on the label. There is no mushroom in these products. It's mycelium, and it's mostly this grain powder. And the reason we know that is because one of the things that my company does is that we test every batch that we make, and we these days, because of just how fast this industry is growing, we make every batch. We make 2,000 pounds, 1 ton of our powder at a time. We test it, and one of our tests is the beta glucan test, which is really important. And that test also tells us the amount of starch that's in products. And so I did a study 3 or 4 years ago where I bought 40 different products off the internet. I put them into our tests, and I found that most of these grain-based products were 30 to 60% starch and somewhere around 5% beta glucan, which is the exact opposite of what a mushroom is. Remember, mushrooms do not contain starch. So the mushroom will have 25 to 50% beta glucan and maybe about 2 or 3% of glycogen. So it was the exact opposite. These products that are being sold out there called mushroom when they're actually starch. And one of the ways that you will know right away if the product says made in the USA, and this is the terrible thing about it, because again, you cannot produce mushrooms in the US and sell them as a supplement. You can sell them as a food, not as a supplement. If it says made in the US, you know it's one of these grain-based products. And it's so interesting because you can, when you buy one of these products, I mean, just take the powder out of the capsule and taste it. They will all taste very bland. They'll taste like flour. They'll taste like a grain flour or something like that. Lori, are you familiar with something called tempeh?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what tempeh is?
Go on. You can educate us.
Okay, well, tempeh is it's a fermented food. It's made out in Indonesia, one of the major foods out there, and they cook soybeans, so it's cooked soybeans, and then they put a fungal mycelium on it. So
Oh,
tempeh is actually it's really kind of a cool food. It's soybeans with mycelium that's completely covered it, and that mycelium will modify the soy a little bit. But and so when you take it out of the package, you're going, wow, what is that? It's a block of soy, and it's got all this white stuff on it, and you're going, wow, well, that white stuff is actually mycelium. Well, that's a food, and it's a soy food, so the fungus is fermenting the soy. But that's what these companies are selling and calling mushroom. They're actually making tempeh, which is a food product and very inexpensive, and they're calling it mushroom. So that's what's happening. They're producing a food product which is very cheap to produce because they don't even sell it fresh. They just dry it, grind it to a powder. It's very cheap for them to produce. And then they put it into the marketplace. They call it mushroom when it's not mushroom at all. And that's really such a shame because there are a lot of people paying a lot of money for those products, and they're not getting what they're supposed to be getting. They're very little beta glucan, and most of what they're getting is starch. And a lot of people now that don't eat grains, and that's fine. I'm not one of them, but and there's also people that are on diets called the paleo diet, and that's whatever it is, and but I meet those people because I'm out at trade shows and stuff, and they come up to me and they say, "Oh, wow, mushrooms! I love mushrooms, and I'm taking this great mushroom product." And my first question is, "Well, what's the brand?" And they tell me the brand, and then I say to them, "Gee, I hate to tell you this, but most of what you're taking is grain starch." And they're shocked. They can't believe it and not very happy. And again, like I say, if you've got a mushroom supplement out there, just pour it out and look at it. If it's fairly light colored and if it's got a bland taste to it, or if it says on the label made in the USA, that is what you're taking. Unfortunately, it's not a mushroom product.
that's so disturbing. But thank you for making us little detectives here, when shopping for mushroom supplements because we wouldn't know that. Now I know
Oh,
go on.
yeah. I was just going to say the problem too is that the people in the natural product store, in those health food stores, a lot of them, they don't know either. And so oftentimes they'll recommend one of these products, and have no idea.
Right, I'm sure. So where can we find your products and how do we go about getting them, knowing that you're doing this level of testing and you've got this education and background in real mushrooms, not the fake mushrooms that are being sold here in the USA? Yeah, so where do we find you and how do we get our hands on your supplements?
Well, my company is named Namex, and you know what I do is my company sells bulk powder to a lot of other companies out there that put out our products under their brand. We do have a retail arm that is mostly online sales. It won't be in the stores, but it's online. It's and our retail brand is called Real Mushrooms, and you can go to the website realmushrooms.com, and that's where you can find our products. But also, if you're looking for a product out there, if you're in the marketplace, look for products that say that give you a on the label that will say X amount of beta glucans on there. Very likely that will be our raw materials, and that's what you need to look for. It's really funny because a lot of these companies now that produce this myceliated grain tempeh-like product, they will talk about polysaccharides, and beta glucans are polysaccharides, but polysaccharides are also starches. So they can have this really high number for polysaccharides, like, oh, it's 50% polysaccharide. Isn't that great? No, it's not great, because what you're measuring is starch. So beware of beware of products that talk about polysaccharides, and look for products that are that actually will give you the amount of beta glucans that's in the product. That's very, very important. Be aware. Be a good consumer. You know what it's like out there with all products, Lori. I mean, trying to find products. I'm looking at labels all the time. I don't buy a product, especially a new product, unless the label. I go, okay, what's in this thing here? I want to know, because there's so many hidden things in products these days, and I don't want processed products. I want the product to be as simple and natural as possible. I mean, it's just like organic. I totally believe in organic. I mean, my company's been organically certified since 1992. Like you said in the intro, and we grow all our mushrooms in China. And I went there in 1997. I took the largest organic certifier from the U.S. with me. We had the first organic workshop for mushrooms in China in 1997. And I know people will go, oh my God, I wouldn't eat anything from China. But the fact is that, look, the United States pours more pesticides and herbicides on its food than just about anywhere in the world. I wouldn't eat anything that came off the Gulf Coast of the United States. I mean, we grow our mushrooms deep in the mountains. We have to test them for pesticides, for heavy metals. We test them twice, actually. So, there's a lot of things that you can't get that are grown here in the United States. We as consumers, we're buying products that come in from a lot of places, products that maybe we can't get grown here at home. So, people have to understand that it's not so much where the country that it's grown in, but what part of the country it's grown in, and what are the conditions it's grown in, and whether there's been proper testing of the product before it comes in.
Yeah, the practices, very important. And we don't always have the behind the scene looks at the practices. So we appreciate you being here today with us and giving us, some of this background information, also making us aware of your company that exists and how we can get our hands on some high quality mushroom supplements. And I'm going to put the realmushrooms.com link in the show notes, as well as your company link, so that we can, make it really easy for our listeners to get access.
And I've got a lot of information on the namex.com website, information that shows exactly how we grow our mushrooms, information about quality of mushrooms. I mean, it's really deep information, and I invite people there for more educational information.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day to be here with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Lori. I really appreciate you and what you're doing. Thank you so much.
That's it for today. For more from Kim, you can go to kimmaravich.com. For more from Lori, go to simplympoweredllc.com. We're always open to listener questions or suggestions for the show. You can email those to contact@awholenewyoupodcast.com. We'd also love it if you joined our Facebook community and followed us on Instagram. Just search for A Whole New You Podcast. And lastly, if you'd be so kind as to leave us a rating and review in iTunes, we would really appreciate that, so more people can find our show and join our community. We'll see you next week.